Let's bring you all in. Welcome to our
There
after
she
show.
is. Hey, Miss Judy.
I love the fact Judy is here. She took it seriously to come back.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
great.
Allan, she was my guest yesterday, and as I say to all my guests, which I will say to you as well, once you're in the Corona TV family, you are part of our community, and you're welcome back any day to come and hang out with our regulars. So welcome back, Judy.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, no, I love the topic.
Oh, Allan, I think you're muted, by the way.
Alan's muted. And he's also
How's that? Is that better?
Yeah.
Am I unmuted now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you hear me, Judy? I said I never could compete with you.
Oh, Sam, I absolutely adore you because I am especially in the past 4 years, I've become a political junkie. So I love your stuff. This is great.
Thank you.
So good. In fact, I like to show my notes, Alan. When I get excited,
Wow.
red and yellow appear, and all the way down, I had to draw things on it too. You're like the Albert Einstein of game shows and the greatest game show of all, the presidency, the presidential election. That's my connection between the two.
It's a perfect connection, right? You know,
Isn't it? Yeah, it's amazing. Your life story just fits so beautifully into that pattern, how you become an expert in your own winning and then turn your attention to what helps other people to win. Just a great connection.
thank you.
Allan, I wonder if I could ask one question. How might the presence of the echo chambers and partisan lies of the present age affect predictability? Obviously, they didn't throw you off with respect to the result of this election. Could they have more impact the next election, or do you think we're over a hump now with more people realizing the poisonous nature of all this falsehood being accepted as truth?
Well, I think the next 4 years will tell whether we're over the hump or not. I'm not convinced we are as yet. But look, I have a lot of faith in Biden. I know him somewhat. He's not a great orator. He's not an inspirational figure. He's no Franklin Roosevelt, John F. K., Barack Obama. But he is a reconciling, healing, decent, honest figure. And maybe he can bring us some way to more civil politics, even though we disagree. As Gerald Ford said, we can disagree without being disagreeable. As far as the keys are concerned, remember, they go all the way back to 1860.
True. Yeah.
So they're an incredibly robust system.
Yeah.
Now, every 4 years, someone says to me, your keys won't work this year. We have the first African-American. We have the first woman. We have the social media. And I say, if they worked since Abe Lincoln, they're going to work again.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I love about drawing on wisdom that's ancient. I'm a philosopher myself, and I love ideas that have stood the test of time. And you're exactly right. There's almost a built-in resilience when you root your system or your system of thought or your system of prediction. When you root it far enough through history, far enough back through history, it has these internal shock absorbers to it because we've seen everything in the human past. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's very cool.
Allan, I want to ask you just a quick follow-up question, which is about, obviously when you predict Trump's victory, all the Republicans love you and the Democrats dislike you, and then the opposite happens.
You bet.
It must be tough for you, or if you could talk a little bit to, you are a Democrat, but at the same time, when you are accused of being partisan, how do you handle that and reconcile that with the with the bones and the objectivity of data?
Yeah. First of all, I have to say, while you may think it's a wonderful thing to have been predicting correctly for 40 years, I do make half the country really, really mad at me every 4 years. And of course, they forget, the last one, which might have gone the other way. But this is a totally nonpartisan system. It's picked 4 Republicans, 6 Democrats, about as even as you can get. And here's the secret to being a forecaster. It's not knowing math, although you got no math. It's not knowing history, although you got no history. It's not knowing politics, although you got no politics. It's putting aside your own personal predilections. And my training as an historian teaches me to do exactly that. And you may think it's easy, but it's not. A great friend of mine is Rich Bond, who ran George H.W. Bush's 1988 successful campaign. Great Republican. In 2004, he hosted a fundraising lunch for George W. Bush, and he's a big fan of the keys. And during the lunch, he hands out the keys and he says, fill them out, and remember, an answer of true favors Bush's reelection. They finish lunch, and Rich says, how many of you had 13 trues? And everybody raises their hand.
I like that. That's very funny. Very funny. You know, Allan, another thing came up during your session. If people really understood, if they really soaked it in, that it's governing rather than campaigning that wins or loses elections, do you think that would affect the inordinate role of money in elections? Because people dump all this money on campaigns, on ads, and then they're shocked that they don't get the result they wanted.
Exactly. Look, in 1961, the great Republican president Dwight Eisenhower warned about the grip of the military-industrial complex, right. And it's sustained by an iron triangle: defense contractors, senators and congressmen who want contracts in their districts, and the military. Mm-hmm. We also have a political industrial complex with its own iron triangle. One point is the pollsters, the consultants, the handlers, the hucksters, who make huge amounts of money by this horse race theory that elections, are determined by what happens day to day, who's up, who's down. Then there is the media, who has to cover the election day to day, and that's how they make their money. They just can't say, Licktman predicts Biden, see you in 5 months. Then there are the candidates who are afraid to go against the media, the pollsters, and the handlers. If we could somehow break that iron triangle, as I mentioned, we could have utterly different kinds of campaigns, and we could direct these billions of dollars in vastly more constructive ways than sound bites and negative ads.
That's so wise. And what gets me about all this, Allan, it was your combination of the disparate, earthquake science, and it was like your ability. And here we are talking about the greatest of all horse races, and you're a guy who won the race designed for horses, right? There are just too many overlapping things here. And I think this is behind what so many people call genius or mastery or standout results. It's the bringing together of things in juxtaposition, in strange harmonies. That an insight from one place sparks another insight somewhere else that nobody else has put together yet. And so I just wanted to voice my appreciation for all these threads we see in your history and we see in your intellectual agility that's led you to the place of having a paradigm of these keys that just seem to be so evergreen at this point. I would be amazed if they
the other thing you need is a really thick hide.
I bet. Whiplash every 4 years.
I can't tell you how much I get whiplashed every 4 years, plus 20 years of being blasted by the political scientists and there are still some hidebound political scientists who believe the only legitimate way to look at the world is strictly through numbers. And you know what? It's not served them well. If any of you actually read the American Political Science Review, I'll bet none of you do.
So you had mentioned early in our conversation about 2024, about some thoughts about 2024. But before you answer that, I was thinking, surely, if in Allan Licktman we trust, which we do, then surely we would just game the system for 2024. And all we do is we'd say, you know what? We need a charismatic challenger. We would just go down the list. It's got to be that easy.
Of course, it's not easy. The keys are the big picture. Not easy to find a charismatic candidate. You don't just dial up, find a candidate and
1-800 charismatic.
It's not that easy. Not that easy to have a big foreign policy success. And you know what? If you govern by the keys, that's great. It's good for the country. Policy change, avoid scandal, avoid social unrest, avoid foreign policy failures, achieve successes. My God, that isn't a bad thing. But I'll tell you another quick story. When I first developed the keys, I gave them to a name you may know, Robert Shrum, the premier Democratic consultant back then. And he looked at him, called me back 2 days later, and he said, Licktman, I hate the keys. Go back and find your crazy Russian friend, redo them, and come up with something I can manipulate. These are not easily manipulable.
Good. I love that. And here's what
I'm a little bit more about what you mean by charismatic. I may have missed it because I joined a little late in the keys, but
yeah,
can you describe?
I gave a whole explanation. I'll try to cut it down a little bit.
Okay, sorry.
Whatever your own opinion is, that's great. But if you're going to turn keys, you got to stick to how the keys are defined and how they've been answered from 1860 forward. And that key is defined as the once in a generation, broadly, not narrowly inspirational candidate, like Ronald Reagan on the Republican side or FDR and Barack Obama on the Democratic side. So whatever you may think of Trump, he doesn't fit. He passionately appeals to a narrow base. We've had candidates like that before, Barry Goldwater, George McGovern, and I did not give them the keys because they appealed to a passionate but narrow base.
You did give it to Barack Obama though, right?
In 2000, this is interesting, in 2008, but not 2012.
Ah, interesting.
Interesting. That's one of the Licktman rules of politics. And that is, it's so easy when you're the president to get caught in the Washington bubble. And that's what happened to Obama. The freshness, the spontaneity, the risk-taking was kind of gone by the time he ran in 2012. He got caught in the bubble.
He became careful rather than aspirational. You know, he was a person, his great intellect, I think, made him a very cautious person. First, do no harm.
Yes.
And whereas when he was running the first time, it was all the aspirational, the inspiration was as big as it could be. Yeah.
Exactly.
So he went from yes we can to how many times do I have to tell you yes we can? Just go and do it already.
There's some positive probability that we can, you know. Yeah. Well, you know, can I point this out, Allan, that having admitted that you're a Democrat, you wisely wear your red state sweater today, so that on a subliminal level, everybody's happy, right?
I was also on the red side. I was on the red side, whereas I let Allan be on the blue side. Allan has some limited time, so I just want to make sure if anyone wants to ask a question or comment that hasn't yet. Now
I can take one more question.
Yes, Allan, I have a question for you.
Stephen.
If in fact we didn't have the Electoral College, and I am not proud of that Electoral College, wouldn't California and surrounding states and New York and surrounding states elect the president, and the rest of the country really won't count?
Well, not strictly, but you're absolutely right. They would have outside influence, but so well they should. If we believe in one person, one vote, it shouldn't matter where you live. Everyone's vote should count equally. The fact that there are lots of Democrats in New York and California shouldn't mean that their vote counts less than a Republican in Wyoming.
And I think, Phil, were you going to just you would ask a question at the same time? Did I get that right? Maybe you can sneak in one more.
I can try to see if I can get one more out of Allan.
Sure.
Okay. So, ahead, Phil. I mean, obviously, if you remove a key or add a key, that kind of throws off all of the
everything. Throws it all off. That's correct.
You would never consider adding a key.
No, because it's ad hoc. The keys are based on 160 years of American politics. You know, as I said, people wanted me to add a key for an African-American candidate or for a woman candidate or for, you know, the lies or for social media. And I've always resisted that. I don't ad hoc change keys. Now, does this mean, one more point, Phil, does this mean the system will work forever? You know, at some point, maybe there'll be such fundamental historical changes that the system won't work, but you won't know that until afterwards, just like with any scientific theory. You don't know in advance when the theory is going to change. A book that I think is really informative of this is Thomas Kuhn's book on scientific paradigms.
Yeah.
Right. I have a nefarious theory.
Wait a minute, I think Bob wanted to ask a question.
All right.
Bob,
All right, Bob. I was just going to say, I think Licktman's evil game plan is he's going to keep doing this until he's proven wrong, and then he's going to become the new host for Jeopardy. That's my theory.
You know, the great thing about predicting presidential elections is I now can't be wrong for another 4 years, and by then I'll probably be too old to care.
That's true.
All right. Sorry, Mr. Farnham. You get
no
the
worries.
last question.
Last question for Bob.
And I'll try to be as brief as I can. I live here in Vermont and involved with the Democratic Party and Progressive Party here in Vermont. And I was curious about Tom's comment about rather than having a campaign period of your electoral process to contributing all year round to your campaign, so that rather than just condensing it all in one period, because you know what, I hate honking waves. I'm sorry, I don't like to go out and stand on a sidewalk somewhere and wave with a sign, right? It's just, what's the point of that? If you're not honking and waving all year long, you're losing out.
Yeah, I got it. So if you believe in the keys, you should be contributing your money to support issues and policies, not wasting it on campaigns. Support it for governing, not campaign. Thank you, guys. This was great.
Thank
I
you
really
so much.
Thank you, Allan.
Appreciate your insight.
I appreciate
Thank
it. That was
Bye-bye.
awesome.
Hey guys.
All right. Well, we get to continue for a few minutes.
That was great. That was great. You're a genius, Mr. Joseph Jaffe, to get a guest like that. It was really.
I thought you were going to say I'm a genius because I created the keys, or took credit for them as soon as Allan dropped off. Thank you, though.
Joseph, I definitely would like to, try to make my point again. If only California and New York are electing the president of the United States, it leaves out 45 or 46 other states.
Well,
No, but
I don't think so.
No,
I don't think so. I think he made
one person, one vote.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he made the.
He didn't leave anybody out. He's not leaving anybody out either.
And here's the interesting thing about the way the debate is framed. The states used to mean a lot more in the past when people traveled less and people were more rooted in their own communities. I mean, right now you could have a job in San Francisco this year and have your job in, Georgia next year, and 3 years later you'll be in Minnesota. Because of the mobility of the population now, the relative mobility compared to the past, this idea about what power states have in elections is a little bit of an antiquated idea, whereas the one person, one vote seems to be the most enduring core idea of democratic governance throughout history, since the ancient Greece, the time of ancient Greece. So it's hard to argue now for the Electoral College, especially since we know how the sausage was made,
Right,
with slave owners being appeased and all kinds of other things going on just to get a country formed. And now we're not in that state, and we need to try to improve what we do, not hinder what we do with artificial constraints from the 18th century.
And I think it would also behoove the governors to start making their states more appealing to live there, as opposed to some that don't.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. That's a very good point too. There are so many things we could be doing right now to make this country a better place altogether, rather than just kind of getting out our megaphones and yelling at each other. That's a very good point too.
The most important thing that the Democrats can do moving forward is to avoid, as easy as it is to want to say that horrible phrase that we heard over the last 4 years: elections have consequences. Mm-hmm. So this isn't about gloating. This isn't about, now we get to bully you. This is about being able to figure out a better, fairer, more equitable, more inclusive country for us all. And that is the only, it's not even the high road, it's the only road. And why I say this, and I'm not, I know I'm for the most part preaching to the choir, but ultimately when we think about what, I mentioned it in that soliloquy, The Republicans have an opportunity now to reinvent themselves. And it's the best thing that possibly could happen to them, truthfully. And I'll tell you something that
well, to all of us.
Yeah, but when you think about representation and reinvention and inclusivity, when you look at the lack of diversity for the most part in from a representation standpoint in the House, Republicans versus Democrats, it's a clear sign that things need to change. And by the way, where do I come from? I'm not a politician. I want to stop talking about politics. I come from the corporate world where I basically say, wait a second, where is the diversity in terms of African American, in terms of female CEOs, board representation? Where is that ultimately these companies that are serving a population and an audience that truly is completely diverse? So this is a golden opportunity right now to rethink, to reimagine. And if I had to make a prediction, my prediction is the Lincoln Project is not going away. The Lincoln Project is going to continue to be a thorn in the side of the old Republican Party, because the Lincoln Project will now represent a new Republican, if at all. And if that doesn't work, then you may see the formation of a third party that is predominantly Republican.
But let me also add that the states do get represented. They're represented in the House and the Senate. I mean, and they can, they counterbalance to some degree the president, and we saw that with Obama. So well, Steve and I know people who have said similar things about we do away with the Electoral College, but then but you're not losing power. You have the power in the Congress, and
the Congress has a lot of power, as we've learned.
Yeah.
It plays into the narrative.
Go, Joey.
With
Joey.
the exception that the Congress does not elect the president.
Right.
No,
Joey,
but
Mr. Dumont?
The narrative around New York and California overtaking the right of Electoral College is exactly what that is. It's not. I think that we have such a negative connotation as a culture about California and New York, coastal cities, because we've earned a lot of that as far as being arrogant and being condescending. But the whole idea of one vote, one person, that hasn't changed. Whether or not you like, the liberal aspects of coastal cities, that shouldn't actually have any ideation around what the Electoral College means, because it doesn't matter if the people live in one area. We have 40 million people here in California.
And that could change. That could
Sure.
change.
And there are people leaving California all the time. I mean, Austin, Texas, where my wife lives, is now called Californication because there's so many Californians.
And what about New York?
Florida is the sixth borough of New York now.
And what about New York? All these people that were paid too much and paid tax that ended up being imprisoned, in their skyscrapers and their high rises during the time of COVID, whereas people living in Wyoming on their big massive farms with a low incidence of COVID. I mean, talk about different quality of life. I'd rather be in Wyoming than New York in 2020.
Joseph,
that's for damn sure.
I don't want us to forget a point that Joseph made today in responding to our guest's best advice he was ever given about intellectual arrogance, about humility and hubris, because I think most of the animus against expertise in America today is due to the intellectual arrogance of too many well-educated experts, and is due to intellectual arrogance on the part of people in, our liberal bastions. And if we could just shed that, which is a vice unto itself, worth shedding regardless of where you are on the political spectrum, we could see so much healing in America. That nobody derides anybody else. Nobody condescends to anybody else. We're all in this together. And the more we can educate ourselves, the better we can contribute in so many ways. It doesn't make us any better. It makes our contributions potentially more extensive. And let's shoot for it. Let's try to be educated. When you read Hofstadter's old book, Anti-Intellectualism in American Life, you're thankful we have such a thing as a college or a university in America at all. So there always have been these tendencies, anti-intellectual tendencies, and we just make it worse with hubris, with arrogance and all that. So I hope we can learn from the last few years to kind of tone that all down.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate what you just said.
Yeah, well said. Well said. And I asked the question to him for you, Mr. Rubin, about him being partisan or. So I got your back. I got your back. I'm asking your questions. Just want you to know. I just want you to know. No, I thought it was great. I mean, I'm so thrilled to have him on the show today. I mean, you know, he's no Judy Glover, but then, you know, Judy Glover's no Allan Licktman. So, you know, that's, I'm joking.
You get the best of everything, Joseph. That's the best key to success.
I'm the happiest guy in the world that Judy's here today. And tomorrow we got Scott Rouse, who deals in body language and nonverbal cues.
Oh, cool.
He was meant to be actually coming in right after the debate. And I was going to ask him about body language and what he was seeing the candidates giving away, etc. So I like to have an intellectual discussion about politics, you know, instead of it getting so like heated and skewed and everything. And Allan's a real professional. I mean, he's like, you could see, he was like, you can ask me any question. I've been asked all the questions. Hopefully I'll ask him at least one.
I want to ask him what he's doing. It looks so young. Oh my God.
Yeah, seriously, that's the hair.
Like he was 70.
Well, he said to me, he said to me, how old are you? And I said, I'm almost 50 years old. I said, I'm 49. He said, you look good.
Yeah.
I think he thought I was about as young as Joey DeMont, 24 years old.
Or 54, however you want to look at it.
But see, a guy like that is a great role model. You know, a guy like that is a great role model, that he's used his mind. He has been creative. He's made a difference for other people. He's been able to take the heat as well as the praise. And he seems to have this equilibrium about him and an enjoyment of life about him. I just see him as in that sense, a really ideal model of how to live a worthwhile and productive life, you know, providing tools that other people can use and you know, taking the heat as well as the help and the praise.
Well, that's funny, Tom, is what heat. You know, you want to talk about kill the messenger. That's exactly who he is. He's not saying one thing or another. He's just saying, these are the keys. They've predicted 100% accuracy so far. Yeah. And I'm a Democrat. I'm telling you that. But because I tell you Donald Trump is going to win in 2016 doesn't mean I love Donald Trump. And because I say I think that Obama's going to win doesn't mean I love Obama. I'm just saying this is the analysis. Yeah. This is how it happens. And then the fact that people come after him is exactly what's wrong with our society. It's the same people that come after Dr. Fauci, right? And say, you're a really bad human being and I'm going to kill you because you're telling me that there's a virus.
Yeah, they go after him because of how he interprets the keys, like how he interprets inspirational or how he, you know what I mean? Like
you're right. But that to me is just that you can disagree. But like getting heat based on it.
Well, I'll tell you something. I'll tell you something. I've noticed something lately, which is there are a lot of these very hyper partisan battles where, and I won't name sides, but I'll just say where one side accuses the other side of only talking in opinion, and the other side and believes that they're just spouting facts. When the reality is, and I think we actually saw this today, is that facts can be manipulated and data can be interpreted. But what transcends opinion and fact is the truth. And I think if you speak truth, then you speak truth. And if you know that you're speaking truth, because remember something about Licktman is you know, he is, as you saw, he's represented 100 different, you know, civil liberties cases, and he spoke about, you know, Gore v. Bush, you know, and didn't mince his words in terms of what he believed, and cited some facts about how many votes in fact were not counted in favor of Gore. But I think if you kind of just say, listen, I'm going to speak the truth, and you have that security, you're secure in of yourself, that's a way to rise up amongst the ridiculousness of the fact that opinions can actually be objective and facts can actually be subjective.
I think that's a
Yes.
great way to look at it. I think that we also have to understand there's a difference between truth and honesty, right? I think that if you come across honest and you make a mistake, then you can come back and say, I honestly believe this was the case.
Yeah, right.
And you don't actually hurt yourself so badly, as opposed to what we're seeing in the political body today. I mean, if you look at Lindsey Graham as an example this week, he lied about a lot of things that he got caught lying about. And then he wants you to believe that he didn't say what he said to the Secretary of State. And
Right.
so it's at that point where you as a culture can say, you know what, he's not being honest with us. It's not, and whether or not it's because truth is a really tough word. You know that as a philosopher, Tom, and even as a pseudo philosopher, I've been under trees with buddies smoking joints trying to figure out what truth means, right? You can have that all day long, but honesty is honesty, where you're like, okay, I believe this happened and it did, you know, and I think that alone brings you more into a state of trust with constituents and citizens and colleagues, because everyone makes mistakes. And that's another thing, you know, John Meacham got a lot of heat recently because he promoted and said how great Biden's speech was. And then people found out that he was one of the writers. And then my friends on the conservative side were like, see, he's a juice bag, and canceled John Meacham. And you're like, oh my God. I mean, John Meacham is an icon in history, and who he is as a fellow and a wonderful writer. He may have said, oh guys, he said it was a great speech. He didn't say it was a well-written speech.
No,
Right?
right. Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those things where no matter who you are today in our society, we can break you down and make you feel awful. And that's not honest. That's not a good way to go about trying to heal, right? What we're trying to do today. And that stuff, it just slays me. And that's, for me personally, that's been one of the things that really bothers me the most, how we break down everybody else.
I love it too, Joey, how you talk about honesty, because honesty is a twofold thing. You are honest with yourself, about yourself, and about how reality seems to you, what the evidence seems to be. And then you're honest with other people. People who are dishonest with others have usually first been dishonest with themselves. And so that cuts you off from the true context and reality and resources you're up against and have available. You can never govern well in a state of dishonesty. And the same thing in the corporate world, right? A pervasive dishonesty is going to take any enterprise down, because you're not tuned into what's going on outside you. You're not with each other as true partners, you know?
And hypocrisy is part of that. So we saw that here in California. Our governor is obviously speaking about staying home for Thanksgiving, doing everything correctly as it relates to the CDC recommendations. And then he's caught at French Laundry in a really elite dinner, you know, that was like $2,000 a head. And you're like, dude, what are you doing? And so it's like, that's the honesty thing that really hurts him. And then Nancy Pelosi was caught in a hair salon. So it's like, that's those kind of things. You're not being honest about who you are. And so that would bother me when I voted for Pelosi. I still voted for her, but I was like, oh, Nancy, don't do that. You're not helping the political body.
But let me ask you a question. Then he appears on TV, he is contrite, and he admits to it, and he apologizes. Does that apology? Remember, the context of it is when you think about, let's say, many people that refuse to apologize. Does an apology even mean anything anymore? I guess is the question.
Helps, but if the behavior, Gavin Newsom, because I've grown up with him here, I have buddies that are dear friends with him, and my buddy is actually his Secret Service agent. And so I know him from he's a nice man. You know, but he also has this very entitled persona, and that's a big problem as it relates to, like, my friends on the right who think he's a complete narcissist, and he has rules for himself, rules for other people. And the apology, although it may have been sincere, doesn't come across to the people it needs to come across to. We'll accept it, you know, as Democrats. We're like, all right, dude, I got it. But it was so tone deaf and it was so entitled that it's really hard to come out of. And that's the kind of thing that I mean about the honesty piece. I think that when you see someone like Pete Buttigieg, I think was an example of someone who's just honest, who made mistakes. As a mayor, he made mistakes within the Black community. He came out and apologized for that and said, you know what? I didn't see it. I grew up in a Catholic school. I went here. I went to McKinsey, and I sat and did numbers and data. And then I went to the military. And then I came out and I was a mayor. And all of a sudden I have all this responsibility. And I missed this huge thing. It's a big blind spot. And that was one of the first things that I recognized for me that was important for. I wanted Buttigieg to win. That was my thing.
Oh, me too.
I
I
like
love Mayor
that
Pete.
dude. I like that dude. He's a military hero. He's an intellectual. He's a Rhodes Scholar. He's nice. And he's in love with his husband. Like, there's so many good things about this guy that you're like, oh, he's honest.
It comes down to creative interpretation of the rules. There are people that live by that. And when you live by creative interpretation of the rules, people sniff it out. They know that your apology means butt. It doesn't mean anything. And then you're not congruent. You're not authentic. It's bullshit.
It's all performance art. It's all performance art. You know,
Well,
it's part of the way you smooth the edges.
I just got the royal endorsement of approval. My wife said she scored at 13 keys of true in terms of today's show. So
good. That's very good. You know, Joey, to your point about Gavin,
I'm giving you extra time I'm getting to 3 today because no, I'm just saying I'm giving you guys extra time. Look at how benevolent and magnanimous I am.
Isn't he something? Isn't he something?
And humble.
And humble.
And humble.
We were talking about earlier today. You know, there's a lot of neuroscience about how the brain is changed by perceived power. And that's why, Judy, some of the people you deal with and some of the people I deal with, they just don't see certain things because it's almost as if, and it's been, some of the very serious neuroscientists have said it's like traumatic brain injury to some extent. Positions of perceived power shuts down empathy, makes you more impulsive. You don't see situations the way other people do. Newsom thinks he's being perfectly apologetic. He's handling it completely right. And the rest of us are going like this, you know? So, you know, it's, we've got to figure out how to deal with that.
That explains the Florida governor, Ron DeSantis. I mean,
oh, right. Well, you know,
totally. He's like,
that's Victor Frankenstein.
We all have those areas within ourselves that we can't see. And if people aren't giving you feedback, so the other point is
there's that too.
No one's telling you, you can't discover. There are things we don't know.
Yeah.
Right. There's that famous pie chart that says, here's what you know, here's what you don't know. And the rest of it is what you don't know, you don't know.
I love that. Yeah. Yeah.
And the thing is if nobody tells you, you can't expand your sphere of understanding and self-awareness. Mm-hmm. And self-awareness is also the booby prize. It's like, okay, great. So you know that about yourself, but what do you do differently? You actually behave differently. And that becomes, you know, the other part of it. It's like, you can say you're sorry, but if you don't actually do something differently, people notice incongruence, and that's where discernment is. And that's when people, they may not overtly see it, but they get a sense for it. And they're like, yeah, I don't trust this person when things are congruent.
And that's why it's so important that we be surrounded with true friends and real partners who are not afraid to be honest with us, and that we are honest enough with ourselves to be able to hear what they say, take it in, and make the changes that are required. And when you see politicians don't have that, they're surrounded with yes men and women, and they don't have that in their lives. They just float out of control completely.
Well, that might happen with Obama.
What's funny about Trump, though, is that a lot of his supporters think that he tells the truth. They value, quote, he tells it like it is because he's so over the top and so obnoxious. And they're like, oh, well, it talks like, you know, like the regular person. Well, you know, whatever that means.
They conflate unfiltered with honest, and two very different things, right?
What the Democrats really needed, and they didn't quite get it this time, but what they needed was someone from Scranton. What they needed was someone that represented blue collar to get down, you know, I mean, for better or for worse, you know, when and I've looked at these candidates from a marketing standpoint. You could not have picked a worse candidate just in terms of image than John Kerry, or for the most part, even Al Gore, as much as I love Al Gore. But just, it's that intellect. I mean, I don't know who was saying it today. When you come across as morally, intellectually superior, seen as patronizing, as talking down to, that's not going to endear. And that is one of my keys. Another key is, who would you have a beer with? You know, so I say that we actually do a little working session and we come up with the Corona keys to the White House for 2024. But I just want to say one thing, which is, Tom, you said it a little bit earlier. The word joy is it bubbles to the top of all these superpowers.
Mhm.
You can see it in Allan. He's got a twinkle in his eye. He's almost like a child, like childlike.
Yeah.
He's having fun.
Yeah.
He's enjoying this. And I think that's one of the things that the presidency will do to you, is will take the fun out of it, the joy out of it. I remember what Peter Rourke was saying. You know, he realized as the business was expanding that he wasn't having fun anymore.
Mhm.
So he got back to flying 50% of the flights.
Mhm.
The presence of joy, we have to mend and heal this country. We've just got to inject and infuse joy in everything and everyone, because that's how we'll move forward. I just wanted to say that because I just see that as
Right.
It sounds very like, you know, new agey, but
it's not.
Joseph,
I mean, my buddy
Joseph,
and I
how
both agree.
would you suggest we start doing that?
well, I mean, how much fun are you having on Corona TV? Am I not giving you joy, Stephen? This is how we start. We've already started it.
Dan Price is a CEO of a company that he made sure that he reduced his salary so that all of his employees made at least $70,000 a year, because there was research that showed what was the threshold of where people were seen as being happy.
Yeah.
Now, again, you know, do I think what he did was perfect, and can every company do that? I don't know. But what I thought was interesting is that, you know, he literally transformed his company by creating an environment of where people could feel happy, or at least a little bit less pressure in terms of their income.
Mhm.
So I think that that's interesting. And I think he got it from, what's that that country that's rated as the happiest country on the planet?
Oh yeah, it's not Nepal. It's a
It's
Bhutan.
not Nepal, but it's over there.
Bhutan.
Bhutan,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, he got all of that concept from
I
when
thought-
he lived in Bhutan.
Wow. Well, I
What are
thought
you
you were going
thinking?
to. I thought you were going to say the Morris household.
Well, see,
He
that's
would
a
be
good point.
somebody good to interview too, Joseph. I mean,
And Jenny,
What?
you made the point well. It
Yeah.
wasn't just about giving people money, but taking away stress. We can't give people joy. We can help remove obstacles to joy and then let the natural joy bubble forth. That was the Stoic perspective.
So what do you think Allan's business model is? I was trying to figure out, I mean, he has, it seems like it's a lifestyle kind of business, but you don't make a lot of money selling books. So
Well, he's a professor, right? He's a full
Oh,
professor.
don't worry about him. First of all, he's still living off his 4 cars and $100,000 he
right.
made from Tic-Tac-Toe.
Yeah,
You know,
right.
he
invested that money.
he invested that in Amazon. He's going to be fine. No, but I mean, I'm sure, you know, tenure track professor. You know, just ask Morris about how much money professors make at.
Yeah, a good
That's what-
school. You know, he's doing north of 100,000. Who knows how far north? It depends on, you know, he's got great name recognition. That's good for the university. You get paid more when that happens.
And
So,
then book sales, keynote speeches. I mean, he's doing fine. He's doing so well. He can even afford to go on Corona TV for free.
yeah, I don't think we have to send him any. We don't have to take an offering for him today.
He was great. I mean, I'm very grateful to
Me,
him.
though,
He
it might
was
be
just-
different. If you're in the mood for taking up an offering and sending, I can give you my bank deposit information anytime.
Yeah, I'll send it to you on the same
I've
paper as
got
mine
many
is.
mouths to feed here in the office, you know.
Yeah, well, it is National Hug Your Teddy or your
And
rabbit.
this was my bear. I posted on social media until I realized she's not a bear, she's a bunny. And so there I was on social media saying, it's National Take Your Bear to Party Day, and here's my bear. And I realized, no, that's not a bear.
I think she might be an elephant that actually, you know, got in front of a donkey in a room filled with donkeys. And
She's been in my study, though, for 25 years, just keeping her eye on me, making sure everything goes well.
well, guys, time to go make the donuts and edit today. But I learned a lot, actually. I learned a lot about, and I love that, you know, these simple insights about polls versus the main point, right? About, you know, it's based on how you governed versus how you campaigned.
Yeah.
You know, he's 10 for 10. He's got a bit of a track record, you know.
That's a pretty good track record, yeah.
I will say one thing, just a final point from my side, and then I'll let any of you have a final point too, so you can get the last word. The question about triggers, I actually think the one trigger is very much, ironically, the charisma, and it may not be charisma in of itself, inspirational aspiration, but when he spoke about this idea of once in a generation, the ability to lift a party or lift a people or lift a nation, the ability to change course or change direction, it is about leadership at the end of the day, and that does inform. Maybe not voting for the challenger, but certainly in terms of voting for the incumbent. Why? Because that, hopefully, all of that energy and vision and potential is translated into governance or the ability to govern. So it was just a thought from my side about, I wonder which one is the trigger.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, that's my final word.
Great episode.
Well, I look at this as his keys really, and I don't know what the connections are, but I think about cognitive biases, where so much behind, why people are so anchored into their one decision and not moving, yet people did change their minds. And, there were, and we saw a lot of Republicans didn't vote for Trump, but voted for their local Republicans, senators and the congressmen. So what I'd love to do is sort of analyze the 13 keys relative to how does it change how people view the world through the cognitive biases realm? Can we really get people to think differently? And I don't know what the answer is. I'm being just hypothetical here, but that was like, I'm trying to connect some dots to some other things that I think about when it comes to how people made their decisions about who they're going to vote for. So my thought.
Any other final comments, or we will love and leave each other and resume tomorrow?
Well, thank you all for another wonderful session. I think it was enlightening for me.